title for this one will be The Pyramid of Unas, or Unas. The Hermetic Tradition, as we have seen starting last week, has a very peculiar flavor to it and needs to be passed on in person. And only in that mode is there a viability of cognizance, or we should say perhaps recognition, recognizance. This is very difficult to appreciate unless one has had this experience personally. We are normally able to understand through intelligence content and form, but there is a particular formless content which cannot be passed on in any other way except by direct personal experience. In India, for instance, this is known as darshan, having a view. And the darshan, the effectiveness of the darshan, is not just a sentimental, traditional bhakti demonstration, but has a veracity to it. And in the Hermetic tradition, there must be this personal contact. The same thing obtains in the Mahayana. The way in which the Mahayana has been passed on is by personal contact, and only by someone who has enjoyed this transmission, and it's called the transmission of the lamp in the Mahayana, and the lamp is given in transmission outside of the doctrines, and there is no way to get it without having personally experienced it. Again, esoteric Christianity in the earlier centuries was based upon direct personal laying on of the hands in the sense of baptism and communion, and this was taken from Jesus directly, personally. So there are many traditions in which the lineage, the tradition, is incumbent for its formless context upon a personal transmission. In ancient Egypt, this seems to have been the province of thought, the context within which intelligence can operate, that is to say, language and time, because we need to have an operation within time as well as within language, and Thoth, the Hermes, is this figure who represents for us, or who presents to us, this basic context of intelligibility. Originally, Thoth was associated with the moon. That is to say, distinct from our feminizing of the moon, that in ancient Egypt, it was the masculine Thoth that was associated with the moon in terms of its temporality. And here we have to understand that the Egyptian idea of temporality is markedly different from ours. To the Egyptian sense, time is a series of compartments which can or cannot be filled. They may be filled, they may not be filled. But the number of compartments is ongoing. So that, for instance, if we're talking about minutes in an ancient Egyptian way, there are all these minutes that line themselves up and go past, and whatever happens, happens within the cubbyhole, the pigeonhole of that minute or that minute or that minute, and so on. So that time is segmented, and the segmentation is quite real. So that Egyptian hieroglyphic writing, the hieroglyphs occupy that particular compartment of space. There may be other hieroglyphs, and they will be in other compartments of space. There may be compartments that have no hieroglyphs, but they are still compartments. It is not as if all of the hieroglyphs then denote all of the spaces. It's not as if any particular occurrence then happens just against the flow of time. There's no such thing in ancient Egyptian thought as the kind of Bergsonian flow which we have. It is compartmentalized, it is segmented, and so the real presents itself always in terms of a shapedness in some sequence. This is very important. The only unshaped, unsequenced, is a formlessness which is never alluded to. The context of all of the shapedness, all times, all space, the all, was designated by the ancient Egyptians as Atum, A-T-U-N, Atum. So very early on in Egyptian history, the Old Kingdom, somewhere around 3000 BC, Atum was designated as the all, and this was later on given a symbolic image of the dying sun fading away, not so much into the darkness, but going into the journey below the horizon and along the underground river from west to east so that it can rise again and be born again, so that the sun coming up has a vigorous new birth in the morning. And the morning sun is brand new. And when it goes through the sky, it doesn't just course through the sky. There's no sense of duration. At every phase, there is the sun at this particular stage, so that to the Egyptian mind, it would not be the motion picture that is real, but it would be the little photographs with the sprockets that make the film, that would be what is real. And that only by regarding time and space in terms of the little frames of reference can one be exact and know. Otherwise, there is no way to know. So that the Egyptians, the ancient Egyptians, would look quite askance at our kind of Alfred North Whitehead process and reality type of thinking. This would be anathema to them. This would be a blur to them. In Egyptian, in the Egyptian language, and we have here at Whirling Rainbow the Egyptian grammar of Gardner, published by the Griffith Institute. If we look at the ancient Egyptian character for God, we will find in the back of Gardner, when we look under G, God, we are given a straight line with a little square at the top. Now, 100 years ago, the first Egyptologists to work with this called this an axe. And for a long time, it was described as an axe, and that this was the basic symbol for a god. Sometimes there's a variant of having a bearded pharaonic figure seated after this line with the little square at the top. Sometimes there were 2 or 3 of these lines with a little square at the top put together, and this was the plural. And there was a feminine plural and a masculine plural. But when it came to pronouncing this, we had a lot of trouble, because Egyptian does not have the vowels, just the consonants, and the consonants were N, T, R. And early on, this word was given the vowels E after the N and after the T, so it was in script neater. This meant God, but what really was its connotation? Maspero, the first really great French Egyptologist to write a consummate history, thought that this meant something like coming into existence, sort of becoming. Other Egyptologists settle for the word strong, that it must mean strong in the sense of enduring and so forth. And finally some compromise was reached by the time of Budge, saying, well, this must be strong in the sense of reoccurring, re-emerging, that gods are like this, they're able to have themselves reborn and so forth. But it turns out that this symbol used for God, used for Neter, is not an axe at all, but is actually a wrapped pole, like a wrapped wand, and that this is the last little square up here is the last bit of the wrapping that would wrap it. It's like a flag, but it's like a flagpole that is completely wrapped by its flag, as in a bandage, as in mummifying some kind of a scepter. This is an extraordinary thing. And when we look at Wallace Budge, the gods of the Egyptians, and he is trying to tell us about the word Neter. Before this flaggedness was seen, he writes, we have already said that the common word given by the Egyptians to God and spirits of every kind, and beings of all sorts and kinds and forms, were supposed to possess any superhuman or supernatural power. This was Neter. Anything that had supernatural power, supernatural. And the hieroglyph, which is used both as the determinative of this word and also as an ideograph, is then this little flag or this little axe. And he goes on to say that when we translate the Egyptian hieroglyphic, we have this term Neter used in various ways. The first line here gives Egyptian hieroglyphic, and the translation is Boy Netri, comma, hair of eternity, comma, begetting and giving birth to himself. Another usage of it, I have become Neter. Another, I have risen up in the form of a hawk Netri. Another, I have become pure, I have become Neter, I have become a spirit, I have become strong, I have become a soul. The character for Neter here is extremely different from spirit, strong, or soul. So that Neter was a very peculiar term. And yet it is the most remarkable of all the early Egyptian terms, because it's the one definitely that meant God, what we would term God. It has all the ambiguities in it that we have for our word God. One of the best of the recent books on ancient Egypt, translated from the German, called Conceptions of God in Ancient Egypt by Erich Hornung, translated here a few years ago, published by Cornell University Press. The whole first part of the book concerns this word Neter. And he writes that apart from these general hieroglyphs for God, there is a whole series of pictorial signs for particular zoomorphic and anthropomorphic deities. So there are many, many anthropomorphic or zoomorphic deities. Zoomorphic being having human and animal mixed together. Budge and many of the early writers apologize for the Egyptians using these animals, these parts of animals, saying at one point Budge apologizes for the Egyptians being half-civilized Africans as compared to the Greeks and Romans. But there were zoomorphic gods for the Romans. There were zoomorphic figures for the Greeks. The insight into mixing human and animal parts has to come from an understanding that there are not qualities that blend so easily in the ancient mind. There are compartmentalizations. Whatever is hawkedness is a hawk. whatever is humanness is a human. If you're putting together humanness and hawkedness, then you don't blur them. But that compartment of time-space that is hawkedness is still a hawk. The head of Horus is a hawk. It's not a man's head at all. The head of Thoth is an ibis. It is not a primitive, zoomorphic kind of barbarity, but it's the tone of mind that sees in this way. Now, this tone of mind that sees compartmentalized space, compartmentalized time, and a kind of a static puzzle of pieces that fit together to make new concepts, this type of mind has difficulty with a particular branch of mathematics. This kind of mind has difficulty with fractions. Because in order to have command of fractions, one must have a sense of manipulating the fractions in terms of a whole. And the Egyptians, the ancient Egyptians, were particularly bad at fractions. Fractions, of course, being ratios. Ratios. Almost all of the Egyptian statements of ratios are 1 over whatever it is. And if they want to make something more complex, they'll just add a bunch of 1 over somethings until they get enough. The only ratio that the Egyptians learned to handle, other than 1 over whatever denominator it was 2/3. And it was a triumph for the Egyptian mind to be able to handle the 2/3 ratio. And a lot of the Egyptian construction of models, even of pyramids themselves, comes from being adept at using a 2/3 ratio in their computations, but not being able to effectively use other ratios very well. Now, Neter, in this sense, is peculiar because it is the only word that we have from ancient Egyptian that shows that they had a concept of an undifferentiate all, a formless concept of the one, which they somewhat recognized but could not allude to. So that Atum, the all, was unstable in the Egyptian mentality as an image. And in order to stabilize Atum, a whole cosmos of gods was precipitated out of Atum, seeking to find some kind of a stable, expressible order. And out of this came 4 pairs of gods and goddesses. The first pair is Geb, which would be earth, and Nut, which would be sky, male and female. And keeping them apart, because once you have them, once you have that polarity, then you have to have something keeping them apart. Air keeps earth and sky apart, so air was masculine, Shu. But you can't have just a masculine by itself, so Tefnut, moisture, was paired off with Shu, so that you have Shu and Tefnut, a male and female, air and moisture, keeping apart Geb, earth, and Nut, the feminine sky. And from this quaternary of 2 pairs, 2 males and 2 females, you had a second quaternary that came in, Isis and Osiris, and Set or Seth, and Nephthys. So in order to deal with the ungraspability of Atum, the all, one finds the next level of stability in 4 pairs, or 8 figures, or what is called an ogdode. So that the 8 is the first time that there's expressive stability. And the city of Hermes, the city of Thoth, was Hermopolis, which was called the City of the Eight, the City of the Ogdoad. So at the very core, at the very beginning, the Hermetic tradition concerns itself with what is stable in man's expressiveness of divinity. The Eight. And one of the Nag Hammadi Hermetic tractates is the eighth reveals the ninth. Because when you have the Ogdoad, the only way that that Ogdoad holds together in its comprehensiveness is to allude back to the primordial ninth. And those 9 gods together form what has always been known as the Ennead in Greek. So that when we get in the Hermetic tradition later on to the very sophisticated writings of Plotinus, they will be called the Enneads. And at the very beginning of Egyptian history, 5,000 years ago, they were referred to as the Ennead. And not only is there an Ennead, but for any particular compartment of time or space, any particular person, there's an Ennead for that. For that time, that time, that time, that time, that space, that space, that space, that person, so that you have the dots of existence, each dot having its completeness of divinity within it. In ancient Egypt, there were 2 branches, 2 parts, 2 major countries before 3100 BC. Upper Egypt ran down to the first cataract, around where the Aswan Dam is, up to about where Cairo is today. And that was called Upper Egypt. And from where Cairo is today, out into the delta to the Mediterranean was called Lower Egypt. Upper Egypt had 22 divisions, and Lower Egypt had 20 divisions. So that when the first great, powerful pharaoh, sometimes referred to in the inscriptions as Narmer, or occasionally referred to as Aha, or referred to in the Hellenistic king lists as Menes, M-E-N, or sometimes M-I-N, or M-E-N-E-S, Menes or Narmer, the first unifier of North and South Egypt, of Lower and Upper Egypt. So that Egypt then has 42 of these provinces. They were called nomes, N-O-M-E-S. Each of the nomes was a geographic locality, and any one of those nomes had its own natural gods and goddesses based on animals or based upon mythologies that were current in those geographical divisions, and they did not cross over. The only thing that crossed over was the notion that the Enneadness held in all of the nomes, so that the unity religiously of Egypt originally was not that there was one religion so much, but there was a single structure of existence which repeated itself in any particular place, odd down to the infinitely small. Atun, the all, was lost sight of increasingly because of the powerful expressiveness of this Ogdoad, of these 4 pairs of gods and goddesses. But the coherence of the Ogdoad, of the 8, is dependent upon the 9th, because it is the 9th that is sort of the centeredness of it. You might think of the whirling rainbow symbol that we use from the Navajo Indians, the 4 pairs clustered around together, and it makes a kind of a center. So that the Ennead, eventually, after the Old Kingdom, came to re-include Atun in a new form called Re, R-E. Re, the powerful sun. So that Re becomes, in the towards the end of the Middle Kingdom, becomes one of the more powerful of the gods. And we'll see in a couple of weeks when we get to the litany of Re that the sun god, Re, then becomes increasingly important. In the motion of trying to express what happens with the relationship of man, of human beings, to this Ennead, to this Ogdoad, to this universe that's compartmentalized, the ancient Egyptians, as far back as we can go, and the furthest back that we can go in terms of an extended inscription, is in the Pyramid of Unas. Now, Unas was a pharaoh at the very end of the 5th dynasty, and the Old Kingdom runs from the 3rd to the 6th dynasties. Unas lived around 2375 to roughly 2345 BC, so that he is an older contemporary by about a couple of generations from some of the early Sumerian kings. Sargon the Great would have come about 2 generations after Unas. Unas was an extremely powerful individual. And the way that Upper and Lower Egypt, when they were united, the way that they were kept together was that a new capital was made for all of Egypt called Memphis. And Memphis was on the west side of the Nile, not so very far away from Cairo, somewhere in that vicinity. And outside of Memphis, outside of the ceremonial power city, are some of the earliest pyramids. Not the earliest like the pyramid of Cheops or the pyramid of Khephren or so forth, but the step pyramid, the bent pyramid is there, and the pyramid of Unas is there. And the burial site around Memphis is called Saqqara, with 2 Q's, Saqqara. And Saqqara, along with Abydos, further down the Nile, several hundred miles down, are the earliest sites that we have of putting together the Hermetic tradition. And in Saqqara, in the Pyramid of Unas, we have, for the first time in recorded human history, an extensive documentation, an extensive writing, which gives us a chance to use our intuition to understand how they were thinking of divinity. Because the interior of the Pyramid of Unas is inscribed with hieroglyphics. From the beginning, as soon as you come into the threshold, along the anteroom and the corridors, going down to the sarcophagus chamber. All of the walls and the ceilings, everything is covered with writing, and we have that writing. And in fact, we have a photographic reproduction of all of the walls and all of the hieroglyphics with a complete English translation. Made here for the first time, complete in this form, I believe in the 1960s. This was 1968. Now this is very peculiar, and we have to understand something before we get into the Pyramid of Unas text. Generally, a common human being had a soul called a Ba, but also, aside from the soul, had a vital force called the Ka. The Ka and the Ba were different. The Ba was like a space shape, a shape that was in space, and the Ka was a shape that moved in time. So that the Ka is a life force, a vital force, but eternal in the sense that it had a lot of time, that it was able to occur, as it will say in the Pyramid of Unas, that one's Ka has a horizon of millions of years. You have a lot of time. You have more time than you could comprehend. It's close to what we call eternal, but if you'll take note, it's a little different. So that when the Pyramid of Unas is going to talk about what we would call eternity, they will call that everlastingness. Everlastingness. That there is no end to the time compartmentalizations where the Ka can occur. Also, as a being becomes more divine, raises up in his or her divine capacity, there is more and more capacity to have increased complexity. So that when one gets to the level of a god, for instance, the god might have 7 Bas and 14 Kas, which means that that god has an extremely complex life pattern and capacity. Can at any time, any compartment in time, or any circumstance in space, can express one or more or all of these tremendous capacities. Might bring into play all 14 Ka and all 7 Ba at this particular time and moment. For a human being, a common human being, this would be an intolerable cacophony. It would be madness. So one of the distinguishing marks of a god for the ancient Egyptians is the ability to handle enormous complexity at any time, at any compartment in time, or any position in space, and to keep the differentiations exacting. So specificity and exactness, precision, in the religion of the ancient Egyptians was everything. It was everything. One of the items that we will see when Unas goes to the land of the netherworld is he will be threatened from behind by demons that try to confuse him. Because Unas has more than one Ka, because he was a pharaoh, a very powerful man. And the only way that he can keep his precision throughout the millions of years is to have had exquisite instruction while he was alive as to how to differentiate. And his instructor was Thoth. That the Hermetic tradition is the way in which a living human being can be prepared for the incredible journey of millions of years where only your precision will enable you to continue to exist. I'm being a little melodramatic on it, but this is for instruction purposes. We will see throughout the Hermetic tradition that the only basis upon which incredible sophistication of mind can be maintained is to have an intuitive sense of an undifferentiated all. Because if you had any element of mind other than undifferentiated all as the background, you would not be able to have the complex, instant differentiation that you needed to survive on spiritual levels. The pyramid was not just a building, therefore, not just a building within which the tomb was located. The pyramid became the body of that person buried there, an extension of their body, so that their Ka could circulate through the entire structure. And that pyramid then became the extended body of that person. So that the extreme precision in making these pyramids was being exacting in the sense of religious commitment to having a body that was going to be able to survive the necessary complexities for the next millions of years. And the Ka would have to inhabit this pyramid. And not only the pyramid, But every pyramid was supported by a tremendous infrastructure, social and economic infrastructure. There were fields and that made produce. There were individuals that farmed this. There were priests that formed the sacraments, the sacrifices that went on. So all of the pyramids, there are over 80 pyramids that we have found, all of them had huge estates attached to them. And these were to keep them in perpetuity. So the entire compound was considered to be the body. One of the inscriptions is, "This pyramid of En is Osiris, and his building as well. Approach thyself to En, be not far from him in his name pyramid." So that here he rests, as Osiris did in the netherworld, and received his sustenance through an elaborate ritual. At the same time, the pyramid represented the solar mountain, the Ben-Ben, the obelisk point dedicated to the sun. The Egyptian word Ben-Ben meant that pyramid, which is the tip and the point of an obelisk. So that a pyramid that you see on the ground has implicitly a shaft underneath it. And later on, when an obelisk was raised, the very top of the obelisk was the pyramid point. This Ben-Ben is the sacred mound that joins Earth to the sky and makes it available for contact with the solar energy. Not just solar energy like in sun's rays, but it's that particular compartment of space which exists through all the compartments of time up to millions of years, that is extended beyond the earth, beyond the so-called natural, into the divine space, the divine realm. Even though, say, like with the pyramid of Unas, it was only several hundred feet high, it isn't that it's just several hundred feet high. It doesn't have to be so towering high that it seems to touch the sun. It's that it's raised above the earth. It's that that compartment of space, which exists then through everlasting time, has been made, and it then is a divine realm. That horizon of all the pyramids, the 80 pyramids above the ground level, that is a divine, everlasting horizon that will never perish as long as they are cared for. But the care for them, the circulation of the everlastingness of the Ka within them, is all dependent upon instruction. So that Thoth, and thus the Hermetic tradition, will have to be continuous to be effective. If it is ever broken, then all is lost. What is lost then is the continuity of the everlastingness. And so you can see that there was every motive in the world to keep the tradition accurate and intact. And so the tremendous continuity of Egypt passing on for thousands of years, a tradition that was almost unchanged. Not a sign of barbarity at all, but a sign of precision in terms of the Egyptian mind. In the pyramid text then, salutation to thee, the all, salutation to thee, becoming one, he who became into being by himself, thou art high in thy name mound. Thou camest into being in thy name Keperer, he who comes into being. Atum Keperer, thou wast high as mound. Thou hast appeared as Ben-Ben in the Phoenix house at Heliopolis. Thou spittest out as Shu, thou ejectest as Tefnut. The earliest location in Heliopolis for having the Aeneid, that focused upon Re coming in is what is being alluded to here. But this is jumping ahead. Let's go to the Pyramid of Unas, and when we come into it, we come in at the entrance to the antechamber, and the first things that are there, the doors of the sky are open, the doors of the sky are locked, the way that leads over the fire glow under that which assembles the gods. What lets every Horus glide through will also let Unas glide through, over the fire glow, under that which assembles the gods. They make a way for Unas, that Unas may pass along it. Unas is a Horus. How does Horus get in? Horus is a child of Isis and Osiris. But when you have Horus, he's not among the Ogdode. He's not among those primal pairs, those four pairs. So the only way to have Horus come in is for Horus to complete the Aeneid, because one can't go beyond the Aeneid. The Aeneid is the esoteric fullness, the pleroma, plus all of the stable expression of it in terms of the divine structure. So that very early on, Horus becomes the divine child who is the sun. And Horus is symbolized by wings, so that one has the solar disk with the wings. This is the ninth. This is the power. The winged sun disk then becomes that esoteric guarantor of the stability of the gods. And the stability of the gods ensures a structure for time and space to continue in their coherence, and man may be everlasting as long as this goes on. But man, in his most grand presentation, as a pharaoh, as a divine human being, becomes a Horus. Unas is a Horus. They say, then in the antechamber, the sky is serene, Sothis lives, shines, it is for Unas. Sothis is the star Sirius. So that the starry expanses which are there are somehow related to the solar disk going through in the day, and then at night the stars come out in the day. The two Aeneids have purified themselves for him as the great bare constellation which cannot perish. The house of Unas, which is in the sky, will not perish. The throne of Unas, which is on earth, will not be destroyed. Men hide themselves, the gods fly up. There's a bifurcation. In fact, one of the earliest religious books of the ancient Egyptians, called the Book of Amduat, the book of two ways. And it's not like an either-or two ways, but it's that both these ways have to be gone through. One of them is under the earth, and the other is through the sky. And where the earth and the sky meet again, that's the threshold into everlastingness. So that wherever one is existentially at the beginning of the two ways, it has a complement on the other side of the horizon from oneself that must be reached. And it must be reached by two different routes brought together precisely at the same time. This is one of the ways in which the portal, the threshold to everlastingness is achieved. That part of you which goes through the sky will match up exactly at the same time in the same space of the part which goes under the earth. The human part in the pyramid goes underground, goes the earth way. Eventually it'll be the way of the 12 caverns. And that will be the way of the ka going through. But the soul will have to go through the sky. This is an early form of an eschatology which has been lost sight of completely in the Christian rendition of it. In the Christian rendition, the good spirits go up to heaven and the bad spirits go down to hell under the earth. But in the original Hermetic formulation, all of that has to be brought together. Nobody is saved apart. That it is only by bringing the underground way and the heavenly way together at the other horizon of reality that there is any possibility of recognizing the threshold to everlastingness. So one sees that implicit behind this tremendous precision and complexity is a purpose, what we would call an ulterior motive, that the all be regathered exactly in the way in which it is all. That if anything is left out, it won't happen. Thus the Hermetic tradition will emphasize constantly on the precision of the mind. And when we get to the Hermetic doctrines, in the Poimandres, for instance, the 1st century AD in Alexandria, there is a tremendous emphasis upon the clarity of mind. That before gnosis, there must be clarity of mind. And the Poimandres will start off and say, I am vast spaces, rising on high to pure clarity of vision. Before anything is said, it will be like that. In the Pyramid of Unas, we have our first indications of this long journey. This is around 2350 BC. This is 150, would be about 2,500 years before the Poimandres. As we go into the antechamber, there's an utterance. See Unas, O Re, recognize Unas, O Re. He is one of them who know thee, he knows. When his Lord comes out, he should not forget the boon which the king gives, prayer, so that she who locks out, when she locks out, may open the doors of the horizon for the coming out of the morning barge. The morning barge to begin its journey over. Something is in the way. A she is in the way. She who locks out. She who locks out when she locks out. That feminine obstacle who is only her function of locking out. When this feminine presence in her function begins to occur, Horus must be the true guide for Unas to be able to go through that threshold. It's the first threshold. She opens the doors of the horizon. If not, she will lock him out. I know the hall of the royal seat in the middle of the dais of the zenith, from which thou comest out and descend into the night barge. Order then, Unas, order him to speak the words 4 times, one after another, to these 4 raving ones who are behind thee, who see with 2 faces, who speak in a roar, which is evil for those who are to be made miserable, for those whom they want to annihilate. Here Unas must begin his journey, and not only is the journey begun with the death of Unas and the burial, but that this whole description of the journey, the whole ritual of the journey, is carved in language on the walls of the tomb. And the tomb is not just a single room, but it's an entranceway, a long corridor, an antechamber, and then another little place, and then the sarcophagus room. So it's a large complex. And everywhere on the complex, from the beginning as one goes into the tomb, the language carved on the walls and on the ceiling tells what is happening at that particular time, at that particular space in the journey, so that when one moves into that tomb, immediately one is occupying that space at that time, and that language is then precisely applicable, so that one reads and moves along, and the journey occurs every time that one does this. Can you see that there's a peculiar quality to the ancient Egyptian sense of reality? This happens every time one of the Kas of Unas would come through that threshold and start that journey again. Being able to do that consistently and constantly, again and again, throughout millions of years, is the everlastingness. Now you can see the tremendous emphasis upon keeping the hieroglyphics intact and on keeping the name of the individual intact. And what a tremendous power there was on those who came after if they would take by order and have someone chisel your name out, chisel your cartouche out so it doesn't occur there. There is no way that your Ka could go through. No way that you could, so that the divine name, your name, your real name is extraordinarily important to be kept remembered and intact. The word, the power of the word, becomes 5,000 years ago at the very origins of the Hermetic tradition. The Logos becomes extraordinarily powerful because it is the only way in which reality can be made to be everlasting for us. It's the only way. This ladder of meaning, which we have to climb again and again in order to ensure our everlastingness, must be intact. Here we have, skip over, I realize because of time we probably won't finish it all, so we'll come back to it next week. We won't cheat you on anything here at all. This is the first time the tradition has been presented in this language, in this country, and we will not cheat you. Here's an incantation to say for Unas. Unas is a great one. Unas came out between the thighs of the divine Aeneid. Unas is he who is over the Kas, who unites the hearts for the one over wisdom. The one over wisdom is not a metaphor. It's not the one over wisdom, not a metaphor for the all. It's 1-for-wisdom. The 1-for-over-wisdom. The 1 over wisdom is a ratio, like 1 over character for wisdom. That particular precise fraction, which must be understood in its precision, and Unas is he who is over the Kas, who unites hearts for the 1 over wisdom. He is the great one who is in possession of the divine book, the wisdom at the right of Re. Without the divine book, there is no way to go. Who is the author of the divine book? Is Thoth. He is not only the maker of language, he is the writer of the books. He is the scribe of the gods. He is the maker of the precision of the mind, which is able to understand all of it and to have expressed it. Unas comes to his seat, which is over the Kas. Unas unites the hearts, the 1 over wisdom. The great, the one who art great. Unas has become wisdom in possession of the divine book at the right of Re, on the right hand side of Re. As we go through the antechamber, we come in the pyramid of Unas. Remember now, this is 1,000 years before Moses. 1,000 years. He is purified, who has purified himself in the field of rushes. Re has purified himself in the field of rushes. He is purified, who has purified himself in the field of rushes. This Unas has purified himself in the field of rushes. The hand of Unas is in the hand of Re. Nut, take his hand. Shu, lift him up. Shu, lift him up. The Great One, the Urias, fumigates the bull of Nihin. The heat of the fiery breath is against you, ye who are about the shine of the sun god. O great God, whose name is unknown, bring at once a meal for the unique Lord. O Lord of the horizon, make place for Unas. If thou failest to make place for Unas, Unas will pronounce a curse against his father Geb. The earth shall not speak any more. Geb shall not be able to defend himself. He whom Unas finds on his way, he will eat him piecemeal. Unas has a tremendous power because of his instruction, because of having the divine book, because of knowing what to say, of how to read time, space, language, journeying, his tomb. Everything is laid out for him. He has tremendous capacity. He becomes a Horus. He becomes the victor of the cosmos because of his precision. It is not like man being a timorous, hopeful, insignificant person. It's that man in his tremendous mental precision becomes the most powerful being in the universe because of this. He is not only not daunted by the complexity of dealing with eternity and everlastingness, it's that he becomes tremendously powerful by this, so that he becomes the Aeneid. He becomes the Horus. Are we running out of time?
No.
We have, published by the University of California Press, a book entitled The Triumph of Horus, an ancient Egyptian sacred drama. And it came out not so very long ago, 1974. The Triumph of Horus is an actual Egyptian sacred drama. In fact, it is the sacred drama, which was performed again and again, and again and again and again, for thousands of years. The Triumph of Horus. Horus is committed constantly through eternity to struggle against Set or Seth, who is an obstacle, or we should say in our precision now, is obstacleness. Wherever Set is, there is obstacleness. Horus must always triumph over this. He cannot triumph without the obstacleness, so that Set is divine, and Horus is divine. And the triumph of Horus is guaranteed throughout everlastingness because of Thoth. Without Thoth, without the Hermetic Magus, there is no way for reality to continue. If reality continues, then the good will always triumph over the bad. Not because the good is stronger than the bad in terms of some kind of a contest, but that this is the way in which reality everlastingly continues. But the triumph of Horus must occur again and again and again throughout eternity. Otherwise, nothing is real. So that there must be a Set as an obstacle constantly, all the time. And the balance in this, which would be a perfect polarity going nowhere, static, is given a little bit of an edge and thus a dynamic because of Thoth, because of the mind, because of the clarity of the mind. So that you see that the Hermetic tradition, even 5,000 years ago, was extraordinarily accurate in its quote, mental assessment of the place of the mind in the necessary structure of reality. When we look at the triumph of Horus, when we looked at this Egyptian sacred drama, there are many little scenes, many little episodes. And each of the episodes involves the stabbing by Horus of a hippopotamus. This is a primordial Moby Dick. The hippopotamus is stabbed in various places. The head, the shoulders, the rump, an eye, and a flank. Again and again, this little drama, done over and over again. It isn't just that he is stabbed once, but it's that there is a ritual killing by every little anatomical part of the hippopotamus. Every little part. It was said in Egyptian mythology that the first ruler of Egypt, Menes or Narmer, was killed by a hippopotamus after ruling for 62 years, which may or may not be some kind of historical beginning of this kind of a drama. But whether or not it was a historical beginning, the theological understanding of the ancient Egyptians is quite distinct and not dependent upon some historical beginning. Can you see there's no metaphor whatsoever in Egyptian minds? There is no metaphor whatsoever. There's no allegory. There's no sentimentalism. There's no romanticism. None of these qualities are there at all. There's nothing but the tremendous will to be precise, to keep the real dynamic. And with this unbending kind of intensity, the ancient Egyptian religion spun off on the outside, on the surface, as in hundreds and hundreds of little bubbles, the reflections of incredible arrays of would-be gods and goddesses, animals and human and so forth. But all of that is just the froth that's churned up by the intense commitment to keep to one single track, one single ongoing Ennead of truth, which is only operative as long as there is someone to continue that journey. And because of his position on earth as a man, it was the pharaoh and the succeeding pharaohs who were that protagonist. So that those pharaohs, that lineage of pharaohs, had to be informed to the nth degree while they were alive. Their whole function was to understand the tremendous precision that they were involved in for everybody. Because only by their continuing that journey does reality continue to happen. So that one owed allegiance to the pharaoh not as some peasant does to a feudal lord or to a king, but because this is the only guarantee that the real happens at all. That was in the Old Kingdom. And towards the end of the Old Kingdom, towards the end of the 6th dynasty, a democratic ideal sprang up because the structure of supporting the pharaoh had grown so huge. There was only one man. He could only be in one geographical place, in the 42 nomes, usually right there in Memphis. So that the structures to support this, making these huge pyramids, made a huge social infrastructure so that there were a wealthy elite class of feudal lords who grew up in other parts of Egypt, in other nomes. And they began to sense that this is awfully precarious to have reality based upon one person. What about us? Can we not receive instruction from Thoth? Can we not learn to read? Can we not learn the precision? And the end of the Old Kingdom came, and a period of several hundred years of social turmoil in ancient Egypt, when the idea spread that one pharaoh was too precarious for reality. there must be many of us. And the Old Kingdom ended that way, and it was the first making public, if you can call taking in a small elite making public, but it was the first opening up of religion. And Thoth became then the tutor of the people for a while. Now we're going to come back next week and finish up the Pyramid of Unas, and we'll just keep at this until we get through the documents. I will try to get through the Pyramid of Unas and then begin on the Egyptian Book of the Dead, and we'll just continue this for about the next 2 Tuesdays. We'll finish up Unas and begin on the Book of the Dead next week, and the following week we'll try and finish up the Book of the Dead. All of this documentation is necessary because when it comes down to the Hellenistic times, we have already seen in the course on archetypal Alexandria what a tremendous implosion there was when the Jewish and the Greek thought came together. What we have not seen, and what almost nobody has understood, is that this ancient Egyptian tradition, this Hermetic tradition, predated the Jewish and predated the Greek. And when the Hellenistic, the Greco-Jewish synthesis was made in the 2nd century BC is when it started, those who were still remembering, still inheritors of the ancient Egyptian Hermetic tradition, realized that they were only speaking in metaphor. They were only speaking in analogy, and that they had a sense of the real, of the divine, intact from the earliest days, some 3,000 years before, because there were still individuals who could read the hieroglyphics at that time. And so we're going to see that the Hermetic tradition comes out of all of this, but has a kind of a renaissance, a kind of a revival, starting in the 2nd century BC. But we have to understand what it was that there was a revival of, what it was that there was a renaissance of. And then there will be a tremendous change, because in the 1st century AD, we'll see that the Hermetic tradition realizes that, in fact, the instruction must continue for their sense of the real to continue to happen. Later on, of course, some 4,500 years after the Pyramid of Unas, it will be summed up for the Rosicrucian Hermeticists that the life lived is the doctrine received. And it becomes more esoteric the more background that you have, that this is not just a polite saying or a cute saying. It's like an esoteric key to the understanding of how the real continues at all. Well, thanks for your patience, and we'll get to it next week.